afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth webinar in the eConstruction series entitled eConstruction for Contractors and Consultants. This series is part of FHWA's Everyday Counts program to spotlight existing eConstruction technologies. This is Dan Belcher broadcasting from the so-called ivory towers of the Michigan Department of Transportation. I'm the manager of design services, which supports engineering, surveying, and document management activities at MDOT. We are grateful to have you here today. I'm going to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. First up is Vance Chalmers from RK&K. Vance has over 20 years of experience managing construction projects. He's been leading RK&K's project control team since 2004. We'll hear a little more about his experience directly from him later. After Vance, we'll hear from Craig Hughes, Vice President of Operations at Cedar Valley Corporation. Cedar Valley Corporation is family-owned PC paving general contractor based out of Waterloo, Iowa. They perform paving projects in Iowa, Nebraska, and Missouri with average annual sales of approximately $50 million. After serving 10 years on active duty in the Marine Corps, Craig worked for 3 years in the environmental remediation and testing industry. Craig started with Cedar Valley in 1994 with duties including environmental permitting, project management, and as safety director. Craig took the position of Vice President of Operations in 2009. Along with this consultant contractor, we also have a webinar queen who you'll hear her voice, and that's Francesca Meyer, who's a consultant with WSP Parsons Brinkerhoff. Francesca will be managing the polls and conclude by moderating the questions and answer session. This is the fourth webinar in the series, winter of 2015 and 16. We will have 4 more webinars in the winter of 2016 and 17. Those topics will be developed based on feedback through this webinar series and arising out of the peer exchanges and regional conferences that are also in the works. You can keep abreast of developments in the webinar series and locate the recordings of all the webinars via the eConstruction Today website shown on your screen. With that, I'll turn it over to Francesca with the first poll.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to pull up some demographic polls, and if you wouldn't mind just responding to these. The one on the left, you may have to scroll down on your screen to see all of the options. These responses just help us to make sure that we're reaching our intended target audience and also help us to put the other poll results into context so that we can make sure that we're taking logical conclusions from the information you provide to us. So thank you. All right, looks like you're all just about done, so I'm going to go back to the presentation. And next slide, and over to you, Vance.
Thanks, Francesca. Thanks, Dan. So, as Dan mentioned, my name is Vance Chalmers. I'm a senior manager with RK&K Engineers, headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland. Started out my career as an office engineer on some VDOT jobs, an inspector, worked my way up to project engineer, and then construction manager as well, and worked mostly in Virginia and Maryland on the inspection side. I then started working on the project control side, doing everything from scheduling, claims, cost estimating, constructability reviews, and then really got into software configuration and implementation, and have helped several agencies not only determine what software to use and what eConstruction platform to utilize, but also in configuring and implementing new software for them. Most recently, for the past 5 years, I've been the project controls manager for the $2.5 billion Purple Line light rail project, which is a 16-mile light rail that is going to go around Washington, D.C. on the north side, following the Capitol Beltway. So a little bit about RK&K, founded in 1923. We're a multidisciplined firm for everything from planning, engineering, environmental, construction management, over 1,100 employees. And what makes this important is that I, as project controls manager, work in all of our offices, have worked with our planners and engineers, with different agencies to see how different agencies have performed and provide eConstruction, but also how we can implement those solutions across our own firm, but also between agencies as well. So it's important to note eConstruction not limited to just construction. I think a lot of people are scared of that term a little bit and assume that that just means construction. It also encompasses planning, design, procurement, and construction as well. Typically what we've seen in planning is mostly on the document management side, a little bit of submission workflow, but also with things like commitment trackings. Something that can be able to, it's key to be able to capture information and in particular capture any decisions that have been made during the planning phase on these different projects. In the design phase, similarly, you have document management, but if the agency that you're working for requires something similar to, let's say, like a project-wise to be able, that has the CAD standards or requirements already included, then you'll have to use something like project-wise as well. And then ultimately in construction, you have, again, document management, but then you also have the construction management software, which can mean anything from capturing daily reports, inspectors' daily reports, tracking submittals from contractors or shop drawings from contractors, performing the invoicing procedures, tracking RFIs, issue tracking, etc. And we'll go into that a little bit further. But ultimately, when you have all of this together, what you should get is a way to assist in closing out the project, but also further down the line assist with maintenance, operations, and maybe even asset management, since you'll have all of your documentation in one location. A little bit about how RK&K works and most consultants work, typically directly as an owner's representative during each phase of the project. There's several different delivery methods that are utilized to get consultants, as you're aware, to perform the work. Everything from agency or district-wide or area-wide contracts. For example, if you have an area-wide inspections or construction management contract, you can provide X number of inspectors on various jobs. You can have a project-specific to design a $300 million interchange. You can have a program management for maybe a new roadway, something along, something that has multiple projects to deliver a specific program. And then finally, there's alternative delivery methods. So your design builds, finance, operate, maintain, your P3s that are becoming more widespread now. No matter the method they're used to acquire our services, we typically always use what the agencies mandate. Sometimes, depending on the agency, depending on the software they have, we'll supplement with our own software to be able to fill in the gaps if possible. However, if you look at the chart, the agency or district-wide contracts are the ones that typically have more of a mandated eConstruction solution, and as you go down the list, it becomes less mandated, or where the consultant come up with their own solution or recommend a solution because of the type of contract that it is. So I'm going to go ahead and focus a little bit on the owner-mandated eConstruction solutions and how that impacts consultants for the most part. Of course, we all know each agency is different, not only in business processes and practices, but also in the level of implementation of eConstruction. So most importantly in technology. As an example, some states use mobile technologies like iPads to enter daily reports during construction. Some agencies use laptops, some have PCs, some still use paper. That's becoming fewer and fewer, but there are those agencies out there. Some agencies have great construction platforms for, let's say, construction, but less so on procurement or less so on design and planning. So it really depends on the agency that you're working in. Depends on the level of technology between each phase. Something we deal with, depending on agency, is who pays for the hardware, the software, the IT costs. Let's say I've got a area-wide contract with 30 to 40 inspectors out in the field. Does the cost to have them provide iPads or laptops, is that included in our overhead? Or is that something that we can use as a direct expense to get reimbursement back from the agency? And that's a big question when implementing a lot of these solutions. Another question is, how is the system set up? Is it in the owner's environment? If so, what happens when there's downtime? For example, if a designer is using ProjectWise to the files to design something, if the environment goes down, the owner's environment goes down, who pays for the designer's downtime? What is he supposed to do next? If there's a deliverable or date that they're supposed to submit something, what happens with that? Can it be pushed? How can we recover that time? And finally, training. We certainly pay for training and certifications for our employees. We also pay for someone to go out and troubleshoot if there's issues with the solutions, even if it is the owner's solution, and even perform quality control and quality assurance on what our employees are providing. One of the issues that we have is cross-training. Again, I'll go back to construction. If we have inspectors out in the field working for a state DOT, a lot of those same inspectors, when that task is complete, will move on to another agency or move on to county to work, and they have completely different systems. So now we have to retrain them on whatever that system is, and then if they come back, we train them again. So it's constant training of our employees and being able to track where they've worked, where they're going to work, and do they understand the system. So ease of use is very key for us when assisting our clients in choosing a system. So a little bit focus on the construction piece of eConstruction and a little bit of the history. Again, each agency is different, and there are different stages of eConstruction implementation. Of course, everyone started with paper. Some are still there, doing paper daily reports, paper shop drawing submissions, paper plans, paper invoicing. Most agencies have now shifted to an electronic invoicing system, maybe doing daily reports on laptops or iPads. Some have added supplemental systems to track RFIs, issues, etc. Something like what used to be Primavera Contract Manager, which no longer is in production. Some have even went the extra step and created their own systems. So either purchased a custom or off-the-shelf software or custom-made software. For us, it's important to note that multiple systems can cause confusion and problems, and it's, of course, the ideal situation is to have a seamless solution, not only between each phase, but also within the phase. So if you're going to have one system to do daily reports, let that be the entire system for invoicing and for RFIs and for change orders. Everything can be all-inclusive in one system. And in looking at these graphics on the right-hand side, the top one is a handwritten IDR. The bottom one is, something electronic, a system that's electronic. And as a claims consultant, moving from paper to electronic has been a very much an awakening. I'm spending less time and spending less money and going back and researching the issues and the claims. I can search through the electronic files much easier. It's more cost-effective for the owner to be able to, that I don't have to go back and recreate an as-built. It doesn't take me as long in order to analyze a claim or an issue. But also be able to track progress throughout. I can create several fields within the electronic daily report that the inspectors can fill in to be able to track, let's say, CPM schedule activities. So we have a little bit more flexibility with the electronic version than we did with the paper versions. So, age-old question that I get at every agency is, do I get something off the shelf, or do I get a custom, do I pay someone to come in and custom build me software? The most important thing to do is perform a cost analysis of your own agency and how many people you would be utilizing it, what the costs are for each, in order to determine that. And we've done this with several clients of ours, different agencies, as well as for RK&K ourselves, and what we would use on our own projects. And it seems that, for the most part, the costs align. You may have a little bit more upfront cost on the custom side, but you may have more maintenance and annual fees on the off-the-shelf version. And that's particularly because of licensing costs and maintenance fees. Configuration costs are pretty close to the same. The custom built, of course, will be a little bit more. But the key to off-the-shelf versus custom is, does the off-the-shelf software meet your needs? Do you have to change any of your processes or your practices to be able to use that software? If so, and you're not happy with that, then you should go with a custom built. The other thing that custom built software does is bring along innovations, where you can do different things that are strictly for your use. On DOT, asphalt adjustments, or be able to embed videos, be able to have a specific change order process that goes to multiple people. You can build that in the custom environment. Now, the first thing I always recommend at every agency is to perform a needs assessment and to do a cost analysis, as well as review all of the business practices of each department in your agency. This can take a long time. This can be several months to several years, depending on the size of your agency and what you use. Now, I stole this graphic from a WSP software designer that's helping us on one particular project. But it gives you an idea of the different routes you can take. You first define what your business processes are in the agency, refine your workflows. And by refining your workflows, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep all of them or keep it the way it is. In doing your needs assessment and your organizational research, you might notice that there's certain things that you just don't need anymore, or that you find a better way of doing the business processes, and that's the key thing to performing this function. Once you complete your workflows, you can then re-engineer your methodologies and then develop the organization as you have it, and then move on into the configuration and implementation. But again, it's very key. This should be step one. Typically what we've seen, if there's a mandate to go and develop or implement a software and there's no research done, 9 out of 10 times that will fail. That software will fail. So a couple examples. I'm going to try to leave out names, but so a couple of it. This actually pertains to several agencies where we've worked before, where we've helped them either implement a solution or help them implement something that was needed for them. So this is an agency who implemented an off-the-shelf system for construction management, but it was lacking, mostly because of lack of collaboration amongst the stakeholders. So there was no way of tracking submissions. There was no way of tracking RFIs within that system. There was necessarily not a file storage or issue tracking. So a lot of the things that are typically forgotten on a construction site or get lost on a construction site weren't captured in one system. The system that they had was not versatile enough. All it did was really track invoicing. It had several other functions, like daily reports and so on, but for the most part, it was not mobile. So the inspectors had to come back in the office and be able to fill out their daily reports, had to come back in the office to do a lot of the things that they needed, track down any changes or any plan sheets that they needed for what they had to do out in the field. So with this agency, we worked together and came up with a solution to supplement their system, which was to use Primavera Contract Manager. It wasn't the ideal situation, but it was able to capture a lot of the information that was needed on the project that helped respond to issues quickly and resolve claims quickly. This was just a Band-Aid. It did not help overall long-term, and for certain reasons, mostly because Primavera Contract Manager is no longer being maintained or updated by Oracle and will soon be gone. Things like that we tend to see relying on off-the-shelf software to be able to supplement. Another example is another agency here, and this one I'll actually say their name. This is the Maryland Transit Administration. They decided to take a different route altogether. They had very antiquated systems from planning all the way through construction, and because of these mega projects that they have now, decided to update their systems, soup to nuts. So they did 2 years worth of research, a little over 2 years, and they did a needs assessment, and they did a lot of analysis as to what they should use, and they determined that it was much more cost effective for them to build a custom solution. Again, soup to nuts. So they went and built a new document management system. They built a procurement system to be able to have the procurement be paperless, a design, comment, and review system for designers to be able to submit their designs, comments to be tracked individually and responded to and back-checked individually, a comment section, response section for procurement, and then ultimately a construction management system that they're piloting now that's all based on iPad. It's an iPad solution as well as a PC solution for the office engineers to be able to track anything imaginable that's on the project, as well as help them with quality control. They have built-in quality checklists for the inspectors to fill out daily, depending on what type of product they're inspecting. So again, they went a completely opposite way, and they did this using an open source database to where they can actually add things on as needed. So they added on, let's say, a consultant's contract authority for design and construction management to be able to track budgets of consultants and do timesheets and do check overhead rates and check approve, let's say, pay increases. So they really thought about what they needed, investigated every agency every department in their agency, and saw what systems they were using from Excel all the way up, and were able to come up with a custom-built solution. So from those couple examples and what we've seen before, I have several lessons learned. The first and foremost, you need a buy-in from the top down, but even though it's, you know, what I would say to everyone is, even though there's a buy-in from the top down, you also have to make sure that because it's a mandate from the top down that you don't rush into it. It's very key to do a needs assessment and review your business processes throughout. Another thing that we recommend is getting everyone's IT group involved, and that's with all the stakeholders as well. So ensure that there's, you know, things like firewalls can be handled within your IT group. If you have enough capacity, if you're going to use the cloud, can you use that within your agency? Do you have to use e-signatures, and what's the litigation support in your agency or your state for e-signatures? Another thing we recommend is using multiple pilot projects before you release the software, of course, to fix any bugs that you have. And then ultimately, try to pick a solution that allows innovations. You know, you can have several things, you know, where we utilized a system where we can have video conferencing between the managers and the field staff and be able to embed those videos directly into daily reports. We also use something like Plan Grid on our iPads for the punch list process. So inspectors can snap a picture of what the issue is, embed it directly in the plans and Plan Grid, be able to comment on it, bubble it out, hand this to the contractor, and then the contractor has an entire set of locations of all the issues visually, not just in writing. We seem to have gotten really good feedback on solutions like that, but it's key. There's a lot of different apps out there, a lot of different software out there that can be very useful for every agency. So some of the benefits so far that we've realized throughout our endeavors in different agencies, first and foremost is accountability. You get your reports quicker. If people, inspectors, or if other folks see that a manager can check and see what the status is on the project at any given moment, check and see how they're writing, you definitely get things quicker and a better quality product. You get a ball in court with this if there's a particular issue, and helps with issue resolutions. If someone will definitely pay more attention if their name is on something than if it's not. You get a little bit of stakeholder involvement and accountability as well. So different agencies, if they, again, see that they're part of the solution, they may be more responsive, as well as the contractor. You know, one of the solutions that, back to the MTA, they included force account in the daily documentation that the inspector could fill out everything that was done, and the superintendent or the project manager can sign off on it right there in the field on the iPad, so that there's an agreement as to what was done and how much was paid for that force account. And then ultimately the designer as well. If you have a solution with RFIs, the designer's included, you get quicker responses, hopefully, and be able to keep the job moving. Time savings, kind of coupled together with less downtime as well. And that mostly has to do with inspection staff. You know, they're going to do more of the inspection that's in the picture in the graphic versus driving back and forth to the field office to get information. That goes back into a little bit of cost savings as well. Sure, you're going to spend money up front, but in the long run, there is downtime for the inspectors. The quality may not be as good because they're rushing through everything, and there's no one there to inspect. There's overtime that you're paying for inspectors to be doing paperwork when they could be doing it out in the field. The information is more reliable because of the accountability and because it's fresh in their minds. And the information is current and easily accessible, so project managers can go in at any given moment and be able to see the status of the project, who's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and how the project's, if it's ahead or behind budget or time. some of the challenges, and we talked about some of these. Of course, their costs, the hardware, software configuration costs. That's a big hit for every agency. If you have, on the construction side, 300 people out in the field, are you going to get 300 iPads at $500 a pop, or 300 laptops for $1,000, $2,000 for a pop? Again, are you going to transfer that to the consultant firms to pay for those? Is who provides the software? If you do have off-the-shelf software, is that purchased by the owner or purchased by the consultant? And then, how do we do the training? Is there one training for the agency? Is there training by consultant? How do I train my bench? And who's going to come in at any given moment? We talked a little bit about the downtime of, what do we do with the people when the environment is down? And then the logistics. So a solution that has, requires a mobile connection at every given moment may not work for some agencies, but it may work for others. Can you have an offline solution that then connects through Wi-Fi or through a mobile connection back to the server or to the cloud? And then IT support. Who provides the IT support? And if you're only, as an agency, providing the software and the consultants are providing the hardware, can the IT support cross over? Different things that you need to think about. So my final slide here is, kind of giving a lessons learned to the owners. It's, from what I've seen, it's imperative to have all the stakeholders involved. Reach out to the consultants, reach out to contractors for best practices and what they've seen in other agencies. I can't stress enough how important it is to have one solution and not have multiple things where you have to close down and open up and close down and open up, and it becomes a little bit more confusing for a lot of folks, and you're not getting the best product. And number one important thing to do is spend time researching and developing your business practices. That hands down, you should include that in any budget that you have for any kind of eConstruction implementation. And with that, I'll turn it over.
All right, it's coming back to me for another poll. So just I'm going to pull those polls up for a sec. And while I do that, I wanted to also point out that at the end of the presentation today, we are going to be holding a paneled Q&A. So if you have any questions, please add them to the question and answer dialogue. It's in the middle of your screen on the left. So stack your questions up in there, and then I will be moderating that Q&A at the end. So we'll be having Vance and Craig and Dan available to answer questions.
Good afternoon,
Great, looks
everybody.
like you're done with the polls, so I'm going to pull the presentation back up now. Thank you very much. And over to you, Craig.
DOT did in developing the eConstruction process in Iowa. John Smythe was the state construction engineer when this project started, and he retired several years in. Janet Wastany has been involved from the beginning. Her knowledge has been critical to the program's success and still is. Dean Herbst is the Sioux City resident construction engineer in Iowa. He's championed the process from the beginning and has really been paramount to the boots on the ground application and implementation of the process. And he's done all this while reconstructing I-29 through Sioux City. His effort has been astounding at the very least. It's important that you all know that my presentation is my recollection and opinion of the process. I have no doubt that my memory and chronological order of some events is not exact. If anybody feels compelled to get a more detailed history, by all means, contact the folks at the Iowa DOT. As a contractor, our initial exposure to eConstruction was what I would call a grassroots effort by a forward-thinking construction engineer. I was still actively managing projects at the time, and my initial response was far from positive. That's something I've regretted regularly ever since. At that moment in time, the only thing I could think about was having a need to hire more office overhead, and I had missed the point completely. The initial request was to email PDFs of material certifications to the project inspector in place of snail mail and physically handing documents to the project reps. You know, that sounds pretty simple today. At the time, it was new and we had never done it. It changed our process. We had to do some in-house training, although not nearly as much as I thought we would have to, and it made our project administration process more efficient, and we were only working with material certifications at the time. It didn't take long to realize that the change was a huge improvement, and it only got better as the process expanded. We aren't what I'd consider a large contractor. We build approximately 20 to 25 projects per year, ranging from several $100,000 per project to as much as $40 million per project. Back in about 2005 or 6, we had made a conscious decision to start sending a fair amount of critical contract documents, certified mail signature required, because a great many documents were being lost in the mail. It cost some money, but those dollars were insignificant to the time and labor we were spending recovering and resending these mystery documents, not to mention the late payments and cash flow issues that late payments can create. There are some people within the project administration process that just don't understand business well enough to realize that there are single operations on a project that build several $100,000 per day of work, 5 or 6 days per week. The majority of those dollars are material, equipment, and labor, and private business has to pay those bills on time regardless of whether or not we're paid or not. We don't put the cost of borrowing money in our bids. Actually, just the opposite regularly happens. Suppliers provide us reductions in pay. They provide us reductions in price to pay on time. We in turn put that savings back in the bid to be more competitive. Only the low bid gets the work. Getting paid on time is a big deal for us. As a humorous side note, the first phone call I received concerning a not received document was from the person who had signed for it about 3 months earlier. That wasn't the only time it happened, but it sure didn't happen as often after that. eConstruction has pretty much solved that problem completely. Later the same year, I'll try to crank the volume down, people. Later the same year, we started emailing material certifications. We were contacted by the Iowa DOT and the Associated General Contractors of Iowa concerning a trial process that was called the electronic filing cabinet, as I recall. At the time, it would be used for material certifications only, and it would be implemented in addition to the standard project administration process, a dual process, very similar to what the request out in the field on a project was. The dual process sounded good at the time, but it didn't take long to realize that the dual process just gave those individuals that were adverse to change an opportunity not to change. I think there's enough experience available now that anyone starting a new program has a great opportunity to start with a process that'll work, and then the process can be adjusted to meet their specific needs if it has to be. The initial year had small successes, but participation was pretty spotty, as I recall. Since it was still being done the old way, lots of participants did it the old way. The following year, the Iowa DOT and AGC of Iowa partnered holding training sessions and really started getting suppliers and subcontractors more involved in the process. That training had a very positive impact with contractors and suppliers. The information was presented by both department personnel and contractors that had experience with the process. The suppliers, the pipe and aggregate and steel suppliers at least, were the biggest initial challenge we had after the pilot projects were started that did not run dual systems. We had suppliers that were advocates immediately, and we had suppliers that resisted. At the end of the day, we told several suppliers that if they couldn't support the process, they'd risk general contractors not using their quote or having a premium added to their quote because they were causing the general contractors to administrate their materials when their competition was performing that task themselves. As a group, we also learned that suppliers dealt with some challenges that we didn't realize, related to different areas of the state having different requirements than others. It was a learning experience for all of us involved in the projects. Right behind that challenge was resistance from different DOT districts, and I am sure contractors as well. One of the early positive impacts was to actually bid pilot projects that listed the requirement in the bid documents. The owners or contractors, they couldn't ignore it any longer, and I think that was probably the biggest leap of success that the process had. The department, having learned from the previous several years, was able to put together a developmental specification that was realistic and based on experience. That was critical to the success of the process. Training continued for contractors, suppliers, and IDOT personnel. This went on for a period of a couple years. The training sessions were conducted at the AGC convention as well as a road show that traveled around to different locations in the state for contractors and suppliers. I'm pretty sure the DOT did some training at the district level as well. After the second or third years, the process was being embraced by some contractors to the point that we were requesting it be used on projects that were not bid with the supplemental specification. We were asking for it to be added as a mutual benefit contract modification, and that's really where the true success of the process started, I think. Additional success was realized when the Iowa DOT added all forms of contract administration to the process: written documents, contract mods, certified payrolls, pretty much everything. It was paperless contract administration. Since that time, we're even getting plan changes and updated plans through that same process electronically. And I'm going to tell you that most of us wouldn't even consider going back to doing it the old way. It's just so, it's that much more efficient. I think the most important lesson in my eyes was that after the initial training to work out the process is to go all in. Don't even try to run dual systems. When you make the change, adjust as required. There are always going to be people that resist change just because it's change. And then there becomes a fine line in these situations where input and training have been exhausted and you just got to quit asking and start telling. eConstruction uses technology to the advantage of a more efficient business. Most of the young workforce, and certainly the generation behind them, will look at you in utter disbelief if you tell them the way things were done 5 or 6 years ago. To them, not using technology to its full potential is incomprehensible. The greatest initial benefit we realized was saved hours trying to reproduce documents that had been previously sent to the owner, only to be notified sometimes in excess of a year later that they did not receive them. At that point, we started digging through files that had been moved to a warehouse from the office complex to recover documents so we could resend them. That's where the certified mail solution came from. It didn't take long to determine that administratively, the eConstruction process was just more efficient on every level. It literally cuts days out of waiting for each administrative action. On many occasions in the past, boy, I can remember driving documents all over the state trying to get signatures and keep crews working and get paid in a timely manner. This has been a huge improvement. I consider the eConstruction process to be the most significant technology improve to project administration since our industry started allowing electronic bidding. Just imagine using the internet connections at work for something other than social networking and shopping. It's great. Early in the process, we actually had several projects close out the same year we constructed them. That was huge, but that hasn't continued as the process has expanded. It's our hope that as the process progresses, there will be more accountability concerning project closeout. It can have an impact on a contractor's bonding capacity. I mean, we've got to get these jobs closed out after we've got them built. Our largest challenge is early in the Doc Express system, I'll call it, which is what we started with, and we're using a form of that today. It was getting suppliers on board. We all lived through it, and most of us would never go back. Our experience with eBuilder on some projects, which is a different project administration software package out there, it hasn't been as user-friendly. Interpersonal communications within the construction team is critical. When you place a layer of consultants between the contractor and team owner, the contractor team and the owner then limit the communications to a software package, positive communications and understanding can suffer. That's just our experience. The largest problem I've seen with all forms of electronic communication is that the intent of communication can be very misunderstood between people. I've seen people get sideways with each other over simple misunderstandings of how a question or answer is written. I also see complete misunderstanding of a question or request because it has had to be requested through multiple layers of people, supplier to subcontractor, to general contractor, to consultant to owner. It should come as no surprise that in some cases, not only does the initial question get lost in transit, the answer makes no sense either. Nothing can replace good person-to-person communication and problem solving. As an industry, being involved in the development of the new processes that have an impact on our business is very important. The best solutions usually involve a team concept of all the players gaining an understanding of how each position interacts with the others and how changes impact the other team members. When we as a construction team can accomplish that, success is usually within sight. Where do we go from here? I have to imagine that natural progression will lead to a process that will interface with whatever field accounting system is being used. In Iowa, I think that's field manager. A process that would allow the functions to communicate with one another electronically, so the auditing process would be performed as project is built, which is better known as utopia for a contractor, would be huge. There are projects out there that have been completed and open to traffic for years that have still not made it through the audit process. There absolutely has to be a more efficient way to conduct business. As we are all trying to do more with less, technology will be part of the answer most of the time. I don't know what the process will ever be complete or not. As technology changes, possibilities are going to change. I hope we always consider the potential return on investment and how the change will affect the entire team before the change is implemented. There's going to always be new and neat stuff in the flavors of the month. I think it's important to get the whole construction team involved, probably best done through the owner, the state organizations, and then the state AGC chapters. Let those groups shake them out pretty hard before making it a policy. It's truly an opportunity for partnering with the goal of improving everyone's efficiency. And I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Craig. I've got some polls for everybody before we move into the Q&A part of the presentation. All right, looks like you are all done with these questions, so thank you. And I'm going to give you another reminder to put your Q&A questions into that questions dialog box. Before we get to that, I'm just going to mention that Federal Highways is sponsoring eConstruction peer exchanges. That's a state-to-state peer exchange. They have identified lead states, and you can go to the Federal Highways eConstruction webpage and see the lead state profiles. And then what Federal Highways will ask the states to do is identify their preferences, and then it's kind of like Match.com for eConstruction between the states. So if your state is interested in that, please contact Kat, and her information is there. So we'll pull up the evaluation. If you could just respond to these, thank you. All right, so we're going to dive right into the Q&A. Before I do that, I'm going to give you a heads up to how your screen has just moved around. So the first thing to note is that the questions dialog box has moved to the top right of your screen, and it's bigger, which just makes it a little easier for me to read those questions. To the left at the top, you have a series of web links. So if you click on the title of the web link, then in the bottom of that pod, a Browse To button pops up. That's where you'll find some useful links. The first one is the recordings page for the webinar series that we've held to date. So the 3 previous webinars have been recorded, and those are available there, and we'll be going and putting this recording location up as well. The second one down is the Federal Highways eConstruction website. That's where you'll go to find those lead state profiles. Michigan DOT's eConstruction Wiki is number 3, and number 4 is the reports from the peer exchanges that Federal Highways has already hosted. Florida DOT prepared an eConstruction how-to guide, so that one's there as well. Iowa DOT has done a pilot on an electronic ticketing approach, so there's some information on that there. And then the one that you're all here for, the PDH data entry form, that's there as well. I'm going to have it in the PowerPoint at the end too. Just please remember that this PDH data entry form is only available for 24 hours, and it is a Google form, so if your agency does block those, you're going to have to do it from a mobile device or do it from home. We have a long format question box below that, just asking you what topics you're going to be interested in next winter. There will be 4 more webinars, November, January, February, and March. So give us your ideas for what you'd like to hear. The first question I'm going to point to Vance. It came up while you were speaking, and you were talking about the second agency that you'd been involved in their eConstruction implementation, and you said they'd done something soup to nuts. And so if you could just elaborate on that comprehensive, what you meant by soup to nuts. You know, I guess you meant there was some comprehensive approach, but what exactly did it involve?
Mostly it was that it covered every phase of the project lifecycle. So it began with planning, design, procurement, and construction, and then for maintenance. So they looked at the entire project lifecycle from soup to nuts, but also every aspect of what they do within each of those phases. So they would, for example, during design, not just use it for capturing the files, the CAD files. They would also use it for commitment tracking, and they'd use it for public outreach, and they would use it for a system for design development and for review of design documents, as well as commenting and capturing those comments. So it covers basically everything that the organization does, but through a paperless solution throughout.
Okay, thank you. I have another question that I'm going to point this one first actually to Dan. So, and then I'll let Vance and Craig join in as well. It's asking if, in your experience, DOTs are using GPS or GNSS rovers or Geo 7X units. I guess those are RTK tablets with 3D models for construction quality assurance, real-time verification, and that kind of thing, in addition to iPads.
We're not really, we are using the iPad location, but more to verify here's what was placed today, not to verify an elevation or a position, but more to record here's what's been done today.
All right, Craig, you're a contractor, so in your experience, have you seen Iowa DOT embracing those kinds of tools? You may be muted if you're trying to join in. Vance, how about you? Have you seen on projects that you're involved in where the inspectors have been using 3D models and GPS?
Mostly when the contractors do. So where we've seen it happen is if the contractors have that technology and will want to use it. On the DOT side, we haven't seen too many of the 3D models, especially mostly in the areas that we work. Some of the larger projects might have a little bit of that. On the transit side, we have seen that, but on the day-to-day inspection of state roadways, not as much. Again, unless the contractor has the technology and is using it for grading, then we may be able to piggyback off of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was something I was going to mention, is that in order to implement that kind of system, you need that detailed 3D model, which in most cases the DOT is not providing, although I know that Iowa and Michigan are both providing some very detailed models on their newer projects. But also you need that site localization and that survey backbone in order to do that. And generally speaking, the contractors are providing that, although some states have some pretty robust RTNs and that kind of thing. All right. I have a question. I guess it's to you, Craig. It says, did Craig fall off the presentation? I'm only seeing Dan. I think we lost him.
The presentation
There he is.
might changed as well, so he might have.
Here we go. And sorry, everybody. You got bumped too? Make presenter. There we go. You should be able to see the dialogue now. Sorry about that, Craig. Okay. Are you there? Is your mic back up? Don't think so. All right. So we'll go to a question for you, Vance. And if I can just ask you to yell into the phone, because your audio is quite a bit softer than others.
Sure.
Okay. There, that's better. Okay. Have any states adopted your eConstruction systems agency-wide, or are they on a project-by-project basis? I guess you talked about some large projects, and so have those large project systems been rolled out?
A little bit of both. So I'll give MTA as the example, because they're probably the extreme. They adopted it for their large project with the thought that it would go to the entire agency, and the entire agency is actually piloting it now. So they basically, it's a bit odd, but they basically used the biggest project that they've ever had to pilot a system for their entire agency. Most of what we've done with other agencies has been to supplement solutions. So that's been on a project-by-project basis. Some of the smaller, like counties that we've provided solutions to, that's gone, the entire county is using that solution. So it's kind of been a mixture of both.
Okay, thank you. Craig, oh, no, Sonia, can you do me a favor and work with Craig to get him back as a presenter? He seems to have rejoined the room, but just to keep track on his mic for me. Assuming Sonia's still here. Oh, these are all questions for him. Okay. So I'm not quite sure who this one is directed to, so somebody jump in. Perhaps for you again, Vance. For an agency developing a custom software, how do we account for the future risk of the system being obsolete?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is that even if you get something off the shelf, eventually it's going to become obsolete. The trend we're seeing a lot now is that as soon as you find a solution that looks great, that works great, within a couple days, another firm buys it up. And we've seen that a lot with, let's say, Primavera and Oracle. Oracle started buying up a lot of the software applications that that people were utilizing on projects. The key is to look at the technology that you're using to build the software and see how long that's going to last you. You know, some agencies are using software that are 20 years old plus that are still viable. They still can be utilized, but you have to be able to see and look at a vision to determine whether or not you can eventually update that software down the line and see, you know, build that as part of your cost analysis model to see how long you probably can handle the solution before you have to update.
All right, thank you.
Yes, we've done a few
Dan, do you know if
customizations just to
MDOT
make
has
things
done
easy for
any
construction.
customization of your environment? I know
That's
you're
when we
using
change
ProjectWise, which
workflow
is off the
state,
shelf,
it
but
automatically sends
have you
out an
customized
email.
it, or have you just
We've had
customized your
do some customizations for us
how it's set
so
up?
that it sends the email to the right person instead of having to type that person in. So we're linking to a spreadsheet to automate the emails better, but for the most part, it's off the shelf.
Yeah, I am sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Greg, are you back with us? Awesome.
We are.
Okay, good job. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Craig, for not giving up on us. I have a question that says, do contractors have access to the state DOT eConstruction systems? So are you working in the same document management system as your DOT? Because you mentioned that all of that layer of communication and the consultant being in between. So if you could just maybe clarify how that works.
It's improved with every one. When I tried to compare that, and it was probably a mistake to compare that to eBuilder, completely different systems, I guess. You know, communications isn't just electronic with the Doc Express system. Some of what we've run into with eBuilder has been, you know, look, put it online, put it in the program, everything's got to go through that, and it's just been a little bit more, not a positive experience communication-wise, I guess is what I'd say.
Can I just add there's two different perspectives to two ways to go about it. Some are very project-centric solutions and others are enterprise-centric solutions. So like ProjectWise is used by every area of our department, which makes it harder for the project-centric communication where Doc Express is more, you know, for individual projects and communicating on that project. So there are two different ways to look at
it. Okay, thank you, Dan. I think I caught that. So while I'm catching up on the typing, I have another question about using digital signatures. So distinguishing digital signatures being the PKI, the public-private key infrastructure, the secure encrypted digital signature from than the electronic signature, which can just be like a picture of your signature.
Well, I know that we've got an e-signature.
I'm not sure where Iowa is at yet with digital signatures inside of your eConstruction environment, but are you using the digital signatures for contracts and other legal documents, even if you're not using them in the field? Is that something that's being implemented?
We're actually using digital signaturing with Adobe, which we used Adobe because we already had it and it was free and it was fast, so that we could get eConstruction going.
What about Michigan, Dan? You guys are still electronic signatures even for contracts, right?
So I can't say what solution we picked, but the problem with Adobe is your certifications are on each individual computer and it's hard to share enterprise-wide. And we're looking for a solution that manages those signatures for the enterprise and not on individual computers.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, and
okay.
what started out as the electronic filing cabinet ended up being called Doc Express.
Next one. I have a question on how does Iowa's electronic file cabinet work? Is it similar to SharePoint? So can you elaborate on the DocX for us, Craig?
As I said earlier, it was initially just going to be for material certifications, or at least that's how it got started. It was kind of hard to limit it to that as soon as it really caught on, and the changes have allowed us to really utilize it for paperless project administration. When I say that, we still have project meetings, we still do a lot of things in person, but as far as the documentation and the required paperwork and certifications and that type of thing, it's all done electronically. And I mean, it is truly our hope, at least in the contracting community, and I'm sure with the department as well, that eventually that's going to lead to a little bit more efficiency for everybody. I'm sure it has already. As a contractor, we'd love to see it link a little bit harder to, more timely project closeout, but there's a lot that goes into that as well. It's there's just a lot of moving parts. Now, Chess, one thing I might add to that, I guess, is, and again, the folks at the Iowa DOT could much better go into this than I can, but I don't know if the folks out there are familiar with Bid Express. It's how we do our electronic bidding in Iowa.
Thank you.
The same company that developed that is the ones who developed what started out as the Internet Filing Cabinet and then now is called Doc Express. So I think a lot of the collaboration between the Department of Transportation and those folks probably helped make this as seamless as it was.
Okay, thank you. Vance, I got a question for you, and that is, what is the name of the software that MTA piloted?
It's their own proprietary or their own software. They call it. There's PMCS is the for their entire program, and then CCMS is the construction management software.
All right, thank you. Oops. All right, just sharing that answer. This is.
I see someone
Yep.
put down MCMS is the Maryland Construction Management System. That was the old system that MTA took and then updated, and they've now started calling it PCMS.
Okay, thank you. There's a question, and I'm not sure who this should go to, but what program do you use
It's not really my
I guess
area. We
Dan,
use
for you, what
daily
program do
inventory
you use
track
to generate
what's
payments
done
to
in
your
the field. They do
contractors?
inspect the daily
Is it
reports,
part of
and
an
then
overall
I believe it goes to
eConstruction
our financial
collaborative site
system.
or or a standalone
But
system?
I'm not 100% sure of that process. It's not collaborative, though.
You know, I've got to be honest with you, other than my initial shock when the whole process, you know, was
Oops,
being
thank
talked
you.
about and put out there
A
on a
question
trial
to you,
basis,
Craig. What
it's been
aspects
about
of the
as user-friendly
Document
as
Express system did you not
anything I've
like
ever
or did you
dealt with.
find challenging to
I'm a
use as
little
a
older.
contractor?
I don't come to the IT game as prepared as a lot of our younger guys and gals, but it's a lot of emphasis went on being user-friendly. We're able to train people in our office on how to use this and how to post project documents to it in a matter of, you know, an hour. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're pretty tech savvy, I suppose, but, you know, all through the training and the different iterations of Doc Express, you know, that we were involved in as the contracting community through the AGC and with the Iowa Department of Transportation, you know, I think it was just stressed all the way along that, you know, this has got to be user friendly for people. So I got to be honest, I can't think of any really tough spot with the Doc Express process that we've experienced. You know, there's been a couple requests, you know, to try to document numbers, and when I say numbers, you know, how many pieces of steel, how many gallons of cure and stuff like that, you know, to date, you know, on a daily basis, and that gets a little bit ornery, you know, and we're not having to do that anymore. I guess it was just one of those trial and error things, but overall, very user friendly.
All right, thank you. I'm glad you brought that point up about the user friendliness. Because when we do these kinds of things, we always hear, especially if we have a poll on what are your challenges, training always ends up being like right up there. So it's great to hear someone mention the importance of that user friendliness. All right, the next question says, how is quality control done for inspectors' daily reports? Does it eliminate the traditional sketchbook reviews? So I'm going to throw that up for whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I'll say it depends. Obviously, depends on the system. You know, if you have a truly fully intuitive system, then the sketchbook is included in the daily reports. It's also, you know, something that you can build into the system to be able to do quality checks of the daily reports. Again, you know, I'll bring up FTA again. I know I keep on using them as an example, but they built in checklists for quality. So if they have someone that's going out to do an inspection of bridge construction, they'll have a bridge checklist that goes along with their daily report every day that they have to, what they have to inspect at different given moments, and to make sure they comment on that within their daily report. The other thing that we recommend is to have different levels of checks. So if you have a inspector that's filling out your report, that they submit it, it goes to a office engineer or the project engineer in charge of the project. It could only be reviewed through the office engineer. They can reject it or send it on to the project engineer for approval. And again, that project engineer can either reject it or accept it, and then it moves on. So you can have multiple different levels of checks throughout.
And are those workflows automated
Yeah.
in your experience?
That is the key. So if you have your system set up properly, it'll be automated. The approvals will be automated. You'll have different dashboards set up to where it'll tell the project engineer how many open daily reports they have, how many are rejected, how many are approved. If you tie it with a good document management system, and the key with the document management system is that it's that it doesn't just include a file storage, that it also has workflows built in, or that you can build workflows in. That is key, so you can take those documents and any attachments that you have with the daily report and be able to file them in the proper place as well. So it's a completely intuitive system.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I guess we haven't had.
I have a question, and I guess I'll punt this one first to Craig, and then others can join in. Have you heard any noise about 3D as-built being required as part of the contract, and how does this affect the contracting community? How do you feel about having the requirement to provide 3D as-built?
That they do 3D as-built of the underground. We're in the second phase of pilot on that.
All right, that's short and sweet.
Being taken further into construction, that
yep.
At least underground be three-dimensionally located as-built.
So, Dan, I know the first phase of that pilot, it was your utility companies, you were requiring them to provide those as-built through a permit. Are you planning on rolling that out to just your general construction contracts? So your general contractor, if they're putting in, for instance, ITS, would be required to as-built those as well?
And then where is that information going to reside, such as in the GIS system? So that's what the second phase is, to define how to collect it and where to store it.
Okay. The goals will eventually expand to all utilities in the right-of-way. Sorry, just catching up on the notes.
I think for us, the next
from a contractor and a consultant perspective, which area of e-construction would you say is the one to invest next for automation? So I'll start with you, Craig. What would you like to see as the next thing that gets invested in?
To facilitate timely payment, the next step that we'd love to see would be for the owners to be able to close these jobs out as they're built. I realize there's a lot to that, and it's not as easy as just making a statement, makes it sound like. But if we can allow the people on the projects, both contractors, suppliers, and agency personnel or owners' representatives, we're allowing them to have a lot more efficient time. And I think that the next step is really trying to wrap our hands around how are people really using that time. And since all this information is available to them electronically and a lot earlier and easier to access than it ever has been before, let's spend our time better and let's start closing these jobs out as they're built. I mean, it should be one of the first goals of a project, in my opinion. We've just got to do a better job of staying up with it. Everybody wants to work on them in the winters and during the winter in the states that are cold and everything shuts down, but then the holidays happen and pretty soon you're building work again. And for the contractors, we're constantly bidding work. The state's constantly designing work. We've just got to better use our time, and I think this process gives us the opportunity to do that. We've just got to make that step. Yeah, I mean, it can certainly have an impact on it, you know, and it's just another little piece of the puzzle.
All right, and just to connect the dots, I think you said it earlier, but closing out those projects releases your bonding capacity, right? Right. Okay. Vance, did you have anything to comment on there?
During design would be to somehow track design comments. I feel like, especially on the bigger jobs, the comments by reviewers are sometimes lost over a long period of time. Most designs take about a couple years to occur. So somehow to be able to track individual comments throughout. So that's during the design phase. In the construction phase, I'm all about claims avoidance. So in my mind, anything that helps with quality, with capturing documents, being able to find those documents quickly, being able to resolve issues quickly, you know, that is paramount when it comes to any e-construction solution. You know, streamlining information is the key to all of this. And then as an aside, I would say somehow to create your as-builts. So, you know, historically, what do we do? Do we mark things up on PDF, and then does that become the as-built? How do we get that information quickly and place them on a CAD drawing? You know, whatever that system is needs to be streamlined as well.
And from your experience on the projects where they are using the GPS tools and they're going out and collecting 3D survey data, are you seeing that as-built process sped up? And are you seeing claims avoidance because there's that transparent data which you can then use to identify where quantities are different and that kind of unpick those disputes?
Yeah, I mean, the more information you have to be able to capture that and capture it quickly, I think is the key. And you know, just like Craig said, we want to be able to close out these projects quickly. If we have this information up front and we have all these models that can be able to track the differences throughout, it makes things go quicker, makes the project close out quicker, and we have a better product for you know, the next project that will occur however many years from now.
Okay. Thank you. I'm seeing some action going on in the chat, and honestly, I am juggling like 5 different windows right now. So if you have a question, please put it in the questions place, or I'm just going to lose it. And I apologize for that, but there's only so many parts of the screen I can concentrate on. I have a follow-up question to you, Craig, on what else you'd like to see in DocX. So you mentioned in your wish list for what comes next, you'd like to see something else with the document management. Can you be a little more specific on that?
Software can talk to the software in the project accounting software that the state uses, or whatever the owner's using, whatever that may be. And the reason I say that is, you know, now that we're putting, let's just say, material certifications, you know, into an electronic process, can that link to the project accounting software to where the project inspector doesn't have to make separate entries that, okay, yeah, I've seen this and I've accepted the document. They've got, you know, 10,000 gallons of cure. Project calls for X amount of gallons, so it's okay. Well, that's great, but does it tell the paying end of their project accounting software that it's okay to pay that? I think that the technology could help the efficiency of the boots on the ground project accounting folks to the point where they didn't have to manually, you know, right now we're electronically sending them documents and they're getting them and they're putting them in the right spots, but they still have to manipulate them and check them and do all kinds of other things. And I guess I'd like to just see it take the next step, and to me that's interfacing with the other project administration software. Well, I don't want to say they're not. I guess I don't know what that means myself, Jess.
Gotcha. So Iowa is
Field
not a
manager,
site
but I
manager
think the
state,
payment
right?
system is separate.
Okay.
Right.
Dan, do you know if Michigan uses site manager for payments and field manager? Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, Alexa's telling me Iowa uses field manager as well, so that makes sense that it's separate. Okay, so I am out of questions in the Q&A. So if anybody has any last ones for the good of the order, go ahead and add them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple minutes to cycle through these polls for you quickly. And I'm also going to just close you out and remind you about the PDH certificate. So when I end, I'm going to end on a screen that has that link for you. So as I moved the interface around, I moved the Q&A. So just be aware of that. And I'm just checking all the things I need to tell you. So this is the last webinar for this winter, and come back next fall if you don't mind. So some of you've already entered your thoughts for what you'd like to hear next time around, and the thoughts that we had were engaging IT and legal departments, prioritizing your investments in eConstruction automation, supporting other stakeholders, and integrating eConstruction with 3D modeling, which is something that came up a little bit. I'm going to go and move to the next poll, so give me a second. So here are these ones again. These should be just quick if you want to change your answer. All right, one more. And then I will be bringing that PDH certificate